We apologize to everyone who's watching for the technical difficulties. We're still figuring out how to stream across multiple platforms, and a call came through and interrupted it. But we just had real powerful testimony from Mr. Sneed about his experience in prison. We heard from Ms. Vasquez about her son. We heard from Ms. Spencer about her 17 years, 34 years, 35 years. And we kept coming back to the system that does not work. It's supposed to be a system of justice, and it ends up being a system of injustice for so many, and particularly families of color. And Mr. Sneed just made the point, it's not just the person who is incarcerated, it's the family. And we certainly see that in the two mothers who joined us today. And we know in Texas, this is the most incarcerated state in the country. This country is the most incarcerated country on the planet. We know that disproportionately those behind bars are black and brown. We know it's very hard for so many of these families to obtain justice. And so the question I wanted to begin this part of our conversation with, and I'm going to begin with Ms. Vasquez, is what have you learned from this experience that we could apply towards changing our laws or our system or the processes that have led to this?
Well, first off, y'all, this is always an emotional, it's always real emotional for the three of us and for so many mothers and families out there because we know the pain, something that some people might not ever understand. And I pray that they never have to go through what we've had to go through. And so what I've learned, and I just want to say that for a very long time, I disliked police because they knew my son was innocent. They knew he did not commit that murder. And what I heard from another officer was they just had to get somebody. They had to get somebody. And so my son had to pay the price. Them knowing who the person was, they still had to get somebody. The department was corrupt, and that's an issue that I deal with. I still see it. It happens. And I'm very for defunding the police, and people might be upset because I say that. But when you have police officers making bets on my son's life in the back of the courtroom to see how much time he's going to get, that makes you feel a certain kind of way. And when you see corruption, and you're supposed to look up to these people that are supposed to be protecting you, they're supposed to serve you, and that's not what happens to us. And Mr. Sneed talked about, I'll get to your question, about once he got out. You know, the sad, very sad situation is every person that comes out of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, any prison, they get pulled over, their name gets pulled up from a police officer, and they know, oh yeah, you just got out. Oh, you did this crime. They're not looking, they're not erasing what that person's done. And what happens is that what ends up happening, they go right back. They either violate parole or they violate probation. So to me, learning that we have to start, not wait till they get in jail, not wait till they get in prison to make those changes. We have to start making changes for our juvenile system because so many young people, they suffer. The pandemic was horrible. It affected all of us, right? They suffer from coming either from single parent or two parent household. There's things, society has changed so much. Social media has affected our young people. They get put in the juvenile system, and that system is just as messed up, just as corrupt, just broken as our criminal adult system. So again, we try to teach our children. My son didn't have any kind of a rap sheet. He had no history whatsoever. But because of where we lived and the color of his skin, and because they had to get somebody. So I've learned a lot since then that I have to talk to my grandchildren about, you do the best that you can, but also know that grandma's always going to fight for you. I know that some children deal with mental health issues, anxiety, we all deal with it. So again, it's about educating them, educating our communities, fighting for them, vote, you know, all of it comes together. Again, immigration. I mean, we've still got children in the detention centers here in Dallas. And who's fighting for them? You know, we have our education system. Gosh, I know so many children that failed this year because of the pandemic and having to do online, you know, school and not being able to understand how that works. What happens is they don't know what else to do. Our young people get in trouble. You know, it's one thing after another. And when I hear people blame the parents sometimes, that breaks my heart. Because parents are doing everything they can, but there's still things that aren't working. We need more jobs for our young people. We need mental health clinics. We need more, you know, for people coming out of prison, because they already have a mark on their back because they've spent some time in prison, and they could have been innocent. So I know of people that just signed just to get out of jail. Just to get out of jail.
Even though they didn't do anything wrong,
Yes.
they're innocent. They want to be done with it. Fine, I'll sign whatever you want me to sign, as long as I can get out.
Exactly, because they can't afford the bail system. For me, it would be, why can't you let them out without having to put up their house or pay this, whatever amount that the bail companies are getting. Let them out and come back for court. Let them be able to continue, because they lose their jobs, they lose their houses, they lose their children, they lose their families, because they've sat in jail with no income, no way of supporting their families.
No conviction.
No conviction.
Yeah.
And so they're just sitting there idle, and they're just sitting there and waiting on time, and their court date gets passed on, and time goes on, they lose everything. And then then you have, well, if you sign this, you'll get 5-10 years probation. What does that do? It sets them up to fail, because anything that they can do will send them right back to jail. And then after a few, well, you know what? You can do 5 years in TDC, and, you know, fine, 5, 10, 8, whatever. Then you come out, they parole you, you still have 2 years on parole, you parole, and anything will violate your parole. And guess what happens? You're right back in there. So there is something wrong from the beginning.
When you mentioned part of the beginning, and there was a lot of beginnings, right?
Yes.
There's the school system, education, access to healthcare, including mental health care. You mentioned policing. What's your vision for policing? How should policing work? It obviously didn't work in this case. It obviously hasn't worked for so many people.
Right.
How does policing work?
And can I interrupt real quick? Could you remind folks why we're here and what we're talking about?
Thank you, and we restarted the stream, and I should have reset the conversation. We're in Oak Cliff in Dallas right now, and we're having a really powerful conversation with 3 people who've been very involved in this country, this state's, this county's system of justice, and we're learning about the injustice within it. And we're here with Miss Julie Vasquez, who's sharing the story of her son who was wrongfully convicted, spent 17 years incarcerated. Before he was exonerated, only the 2nd person in the history of Dallas County to be exonerated without DNA evidence. After we heard from Ms. Vasquez, we heard from Lucille Spencer, whose son spent 34 years wrongfully convicted, incarcerated. She fought every single day going forward from the day of his incarceration, and she's shared with us the community, the allies, the partners that did their part to help bring some amount of justice to a very unjust situation. And then we heard from Michael Sneed, who spent 35 years incarcerated, put away at 17 years old for a nonviolent crime, and what that meant for him in his life. And we're learning about what it does to the families beyond those who are just incarcerated. And Ms. Vasquez was just telling us about, she's beginning to tell us about all of the different systems that come together to produce this system. And whether it's healthcare, whether it's our education system, whether it's policing. And I was just asking her the question, what should policing look like? What should we expect from police in this country? And I'd love for you to answer that.
An unfortunate unfortunately, there's so much that needs change. We are over-policed. Police do not prevent crimes. I believe that. They don't prevent crimes. They're there after the crime has been committed. I also believe that definitely, they're overfunded. Those funds that the police department receives, like millions of dollars on war tactics. Our incident last year on the bridge, peaceful protesting. What happened? They shot at people with rubber bullets. They shot a guy's eye out. That's definitely, it was a peaceful protest. It was over policing. But police, time and time again in my neighborhood, if a car gets pulled over, you have 5 police squad cars. Whether it's a tag, whatever the case might be, and I've heard from police officers say, well, when we punch in the plates, it might say this, it might say that. Well, that's something that I could disagree on. But number one, that funding, those millions of dollars that we give to the police departments, their overtime, them sitting at the corner just watching, a whole lot, I could say a whole lot, but I'll stop there. But I think those funds that we're funding them for is we could use that in our communities. We could use that in our communities.
To fund some of those
To
things
fund
you
some of
talked
those
about,
things that I talked
mental
about.
health care,
Yes,
access
jobs,
and treatment,
youth programs for our young people.
responding to nonviolent incidents without the use of force, but with a social worker or
Yes.
a counselor or
Yes.
or someone who can intervene nonviolently
Yes.
and help someone who needs help. Is
Absolutely.
that a way of thinking about it?
That's-
And I want to, because I think what you and others have asked for can be mischaracterized. I want to make clear that you're asking not for less, but for more safety. You want to see everyone come through okay, and you want those who are sworn to serve and protect to make sure that they're really focused on the well-being of everyone, especially those who've been targeted
Yes.
historically by police disproportionately, including Black Texans, Mexican American Texans, Texans of color across the state. I know just from many of the police officers I've known that so many enter the service for the best of reasons. They are in a tough job and a job that has some significant risk to it. I also know that unfortunately we have a system in this country where those officers who don't enter for the best of reasons or who use that power in the wrong ways are very rarely brought to account or brought to justice. And it tarnishes, I think, many police officers, including the good ones. And that's why I asked you your vision for how those who want to enter the service and are entering it for the right reasons, and those who are serving right now and doing a good job, how we support them by making sure that they can police in a way that is truly good for everyone in the community. Because I think when that trust is rebuilt between the community and our police departments, inherently our communities are going to be safer. But the situation you described about the disproportionate use of force and the consequences that flow from that makes us less, not more safe. And so I appreciate you starting there. We only have a few minutes, and I wonder, Ms. Spencer, if we could get some final thoughts from you about what you would like to see going forward. You said that this fight is not over. Not only not over for your son, it's not over for other people's sons and daughters across the country. What does that fight look like for you going forward? What do you want to see?
Number one, I feel like, and I don't even feel like it, I know this is one of the things. When you go and put a person, pick up someone, or someone says, even when they use the, can't get back at the name of it right now.
That's all right.
Crime Stop and stuff. Make sure the individual is telling the truth and not lying. Because people tell you all kind of lies for that money they put up.
We recently learned, and I can't remember all the details, but there was I think this was in Houston, the folks on the internet can correct me if I'm wrong, someone wrongfully called in a 911 call on a house police went in, ended up killing the individuals in the house. There was no crime being committed. It was someone trying to harm someone else in their community, using the police as the means to doing that. So your point about if you're gonna put that out there, make sure that it's true.
People will lie for money, and this I know for a fact, because there was plenty of money put up for my son's case. And I know for a fact the woman was lying, but nobody looked at her.
Mm.
She's not on trial, your son is. Make sure, because when you disturb somebody else, then that hurts somebody else.
Mm.
And the money's not everything. Because once that money's gone, you get it in your hand, you gotta spend it and it's gone. You still gotta live.
The incentives seem to be wrong. The way that we're encouraging people seem to be wrong and are
It's
putting
not no
innocent.
thing to be wrong.
It is wrong. It is wrong. Thank you for correcting me. You're right.
Because number one, I will lie if I'm not a Christian to get what you got to get offered. When you find out that person is wrong and lying about a thing, start going back and checking on whatever else happened. Because I think about the case that my son's in. When the police showed up, it was one person involved in it. But when they picked up two.
Hmm.
The things they said about the case, they've never proved any of it. So make sure your lies is together. Because that don't only hurt one person, it hurts your family and the other families involved in it.
That's right.
And the other family don't wanna give in because the first thing they say, the police say he did it, so he did it. But they don't wanna take the truth about it. I mean, I had guys, families call me to wanna know what they were saying about my child in my neighborhood, about her child. And so I went to tell her, she got mad at me, she hung up in my face.
Hmm.
Because I told her they wasn't talking about my child, they were talking about where her child was going. Not my child. I said, honey, we're all parents, and our kids will lie to you when you get out of your face.
Hmm.
So number one, we need to find out the whole story before we take one person's word for it.
That's right.
Or either, I remember when this happened, during this time, it was supposed to be, eyewitness was no good. So she went back and got two more people to tell the same lie she told. So make sure you backtrack all of it. Just don't take part of it because you hear it. Because there's two sides to every story. And also, when you put a person behind bars, it's not just for that particular time. Mr. Sneed got to carry this with him the rest of his life. I've got to take care of what my son has done for the rest of my life. Miss Julie has to take the rest of her life. Because once it's out there, it's not going nowhere. It's not going back. So we need to make sure the money you're spending to put these guys in jail, spend that money on some of these things that you're not doing. Stop putting money into things that you have to turn next 4 years you're changing back. If it's working, let it go and stop changing things back and forth. Because all you're doing is confusing people and making it hard for the next person.
Mr. Sneed, any final comments?
Well, to me, defunding the police mean taking some of them out of deep ellum in the clubs and things, sitting there drinking and having a good time on taxpayers' dollars. That's what I call defunding the police. I call defunding the police having 150 cops around the state of Texas just to see somebody go get a COVID shot. Why would you need 150 cars there? So that's what I call defunding the police. And for the judicial system, I think the first thing they need to do to make it a little better is to take the state-appointed attorneys out of the district attorney's office so that they can work for the people and not for the district attorney. And that's one main thing we need to do is get them out of there, because as long as they're working in there with the officers and with the DA and getting paid by the state, what can a guy expect? You see what I'm saying? What can you expect? And just as she say, You'd be surprised at how many people plead guilty just because they don't have money, and they set your case off over and over and over until you plead guilty to something that you didn't do, just so you can get out of there. Just to get out of it. You plead guilty. You want to get with your wife. You want to get with your kid. And they say, well, they just set your court date off to next December. Next December? I've been in here 10 years, 5 years. Well, the judges are going on vacation. Just like that. I mean, seriously, they tell you some stuff like that. And then, so, we need to separate this attorney office from the DA's office so that he can work with his client and things can get better. And let a man know he got some hope. Give him a trial. Give him justice. That's,
Yeah.
you know, just give a man a fair chance. That's all they need. Make bond, make bail bond affordable for all people, not just for Caucasian, but make bond affordable for Black and Latin so that we can make bond. And then when my dad can make bond, let him get his money back like the Caucasians get their money back if I show up in court. Don't just keep my dad's money and give the Caucasian back his money because his son showed up. That's not fair. But what I learned with Top is that y'all would be surprised at how these judges act when you face to face with them. Top, we do court watches. So we go to court. When we're busted in the court, judges swing their whole chair around. They don't want to see us. We've had judges leave the office because they don't want to see us. And they got to be fair because Top is there. And so I think people should get involved in the judicial system. It'll make a difference if people are in that court looking that judge in the eye to make the right decision. And so the people need to get involved. And that's the way I see it. And more organizations should get involved in this system. That's the way I see it.
It's not gonna change, it's not gonna get better unless more people get
That's
involved.
right.
Yeah. Well, I wanna thank each of you for spending the time with us. Ms. Vasquez, sharing your story, sharing what you think some of the solutions are to the challenge that you faced and that other families are facing. Ms. Spencer, telling your story, literally sharing this story so those who are watching can see pictures of your son and those who helped to do this and trying to point us in a better direction. And Mr. Snead just reminding us that we all got to get involved. Like we can't, if you're watching this, you can't be on the sidelines. You can't just say, well, that's a pity, and then go on with your life.
That's right.
You have to, as I am, be moved to change this. And
We know it's one to do it.
that's right. And you're not going to do it on Twitter or Facebook. And we love those platforms because that's how we're connecting with you right now. You got to do it in person. You got to join with organizations who are literally talking to people in their communities, who are going into the courts, who are making a difference. And so I was just handed this to say, can we ask our viewers to visit the top website if they want to plug in? And I think that's a great idea. It's organizedtexas.org, organizedtexas.org. That's the Texas Organizing Project. That's who we were knocking on doors with in the Los Altos neighborhood yesterday. It's a group that for the last 10 years has been going into underrepresented Black and brown communities, and not to win elections, but to get some justice for people, whether it's in their schools, whether it's in the courtrooms, whether it's economic life, whether it's the kind of environmental racism that you see throughout Texas. And we just saw the story about Shingle Mountain finally getting removed and the city of Dallas buying the land. I think that has to do with this kind of organizing that we're seeing here. So that's a way that you can get involved. Grateful to everyone who joined us, and especially grateful to the three of you for your graciousness and your generosity in sharing your story. I think we're all better for it, and I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, as you said, Ms. Spencer, for all of our kids, everybody's kids out there. So thanks, everybody.